Our entire family became entangled in a peculiar situation involving what seemed like a double effect system connected to my uncle's family. It worked in strange ways. For instance, if my father earned 10,000 yuan in a month, somehow my uncle's stock investment account would show an increase of 20,000 yuan. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, my aunt's usually rough skin would become noticeably smoother and fairer, twice as much as any lotion might achieve. We worked hard and saved for a long time to finally move into a bright, roomy condominium. Almost immediately after we moved, my uncle's family also moved, settling into a townhouse located in the very same neighborhood. This pattern continued right up until the final exams for the college entrance test. On one of the exam days, I accidentally drank some water that had been tampered with, causing severe stomach pains. Despite the discomfort, I managed to push through and finish answering all the questions. I honestly thought my chances were ruined because of the incident. However, just as I was struggling, emergency medical personnel were called to another examination room where they had to rush my cousin Jason to the hospital because he had completely lost control during the test. When I finally walked out of the exam hall, my parents were already waiting for me, ready to take me to the hospital as well. They seemed puzzled by the whole situation. My grades had never been particularly good, so I usually didn't feel much pressure during exams. They couldn't understand why I would suddenly experience such intense stress that it caused stomach spasms. Jason's incident, however, was much more dramatic and caused quite a stir. Experts from the top hospitals in the city were brought in for consultations. They examined him thoroughly, almost like he was a scientific specimen, but they couldn't determine the specific cause of his sudden, explosive outburst during the exam, something described crudely by others as like a machine gun going off. Eventually, the medical experts concluded that immense pressure from the exams must have triggered the episode. At the hospital, my grandparents were distraught. My grandmother, especially, was wailing dramatically by Jason's bedside. "My sweet grandson," she cried, "the light of my life. What did you ever do to deserve something like this? Who could have known you were under such enormous stress?" Listening to my grandparents' loud laments, anyone unfamiliar with the situation might have mistakenly thought Jason had passed away. My parents hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances about whether they should approach. The moment my grandmother spotted me standing there, she charged towards me like an angry bird shouting accusations. "Why are you here?" she yelled. "Did you come just to gloat about your cousin being sick? Is that it?" I was completely taken aback. My father quickly stepped between us, firmly pushing against my grandmother. "Mom, what are you talking about?" he said, his face stern. "Emily is sick too. She just came over from a different department in the hospital." But my grandmother paid no attention to my condition, glaring at me with pure resentment. "She's sick. It must be her bad luck spreading to Jason. She probably doesn't want him to get into a good college." That was too much for my mother. "So, my daughter being ill is considered bad luck, but your precious grandson having a public meltdown isn't?" she retorted sharply. "Jason's incident disrupted the exam for many other students, ruining their papers. Now, that's what I call real bad luck. Go on, keep cursing if you want, but just watch how it all comes back to affect Jason." My grandmother's eyes widened, clearly wanting to curse more but now hesitant, perhaps fearing my mother's words might hold some truth. My mom saw her reaction and gave a quiet, satisfied chuckle. "Our family's problems stem from the wrongdoings you've committed in the past," she continued pointedly. "Keep up your curses. My daughter is resilient, but your pampered grandson might not be strong enough to handle the consequences of your negative energy." My grandmother stood there, fists clenched tightly, grinding her teeth so loudly you could almost hear it. It was obvious she was mentally unleashing a string of curses, none of them pleasant. My grandfather couldn't tolerate the scene any longer and finally barked, "That's enough." He then turned to my father. "Aren't you going to say something to stop this?" My father replied calmly, "My tongue feels stiff, just like yours, Dad. You didn't intervene just now either." My grandfather's face flushed deep red and he waved dismissively at us. "Just get out of here." So we left. I felt a sense of relief as we walked away, and my mother looked quite pleased with herself. Over the years, constant arguments with my grandmother had sharpened my mother's ability to deliver cutting remarks, even though she used to be much more reserved. Seeing my grandmother silenced like that probably gave my mom a sense of victory she'd savor for the rest of the day. My father always supported my mother, especially because my grandmother's behavior had often been unreasonable over the years. Her strong preference for boys over girls was well known, and she had always considered me unlucky. My cousin Jason and I were born very close together, only about an hour apart. Despite this, shortly after our births, some traveling fortune teller managed to convince my grandmother that our destinies were in conflict. The fortune teller apparently questioned why Jason, the boy, should have his fortune overshadowed by me, the girl. Hearing this, my grandmother insisted that I should be sent far away. My parents refused to do such a thing. Consequently, I never experienced a single kind glance or warm word from my grandmother growing up. Thankfully, both my parents were educated individuals who didn't believe in superstitions. They treated me just like any child should be treated, never making me feel less important. Knowing my grandmother disliked me, I spent much of my childhood living with my other grandmother in the city. I had hoped that being physically separated from Jason, with my paternal grandmother not seeing me often, might eventually lessen the impact of those absurd stories about clashing destinies. Unfortunately, my Uncle Paul's family had other plans. They eventually decided to move to the city as well. My uncle purchased that townhouse in the exact same residential complex where we lived in our condo. Jason and I ended up attending the same school, although we were in different classes. To make matters even more unavoidable, my Aunt Maria opened her clothing boutique directly across the street from my mother's office building. There was simply no way to avoid constant encounters. Shortly after we left the hospital that day, my Uncle Paul called my father's phone, sounding extremely agitated, as if there were an emergency. My father was driving at the time, so my mother answered the call, holding the phone away from her ear so we could all hear my uncle's frantic shouting. "Robert, did you have any problems while driving just now? Any close calls?" My father, slightly annoyed by the question, replied curtly, "No, I was driving perfectly fine. Why would I have any trouble?" My uncle continued, his voice still laced with anxiety. "I heard Emily was sick too. Is that really true?" My father, losing patience, said, "Brother, if there's nothing else important, I need to hang up now." Wait, my uncle protested, but my father ended the call. My mother sighed. It's rarer than finding gold to get a call like that from him these days. A few years ago, maybe he genuinely cared about us. But now, just like your mother, he probably thinks Emily is somehow responsible for Jason's misfortune. My father remarked softly, "Well, my brother didn't explicitly say that. Let's try not to dwell on it. It's bad enough that both children had issues during their final exams." My mother turned around from the passenger seat to offer me some comfort. "Emily, just do the best you can on the remaining exams. Don't put too much pressure on yourself." Meanwhile, I was scrolling through text messages my uncle had sent, now expressing concern about my father's driving ability. I frowned slightly, finding it odd. Then my mother noticed something. "Look, there's a scraped area on the back of the car," she pointed out. Neither of us had any idea when it might have happened. My father sighed, took out a cartoon cat sticker from the glove compartment, and stuck it over the scratch. "Our finances are pretty tight right now," he said. "Let's just cover it up for now. Getting it properly repaired will cost extra money we don't really have." That evening, while browsing social media, I came across a post from my classmate, Olivia. She wrote, "What a rough day. First, I encountered a biochemical weapon situation during the exam, and then I narrowly avoided being part of a collision just outside the city, hoping the rest of my trip goes smoothly." The accompanying picture showed a 3-car pileup on a highway overpass. The rear end of the front car was completely smashed in. Tucked away in one corner of the photograph, I could clearly see an uncle figure, looking furious and holding up his phone as if arguing. It seemed like too much of a coincidence. Later, while the television news was reporting on the college entrance exams, they briefly showed a blurry clip from surveillance footage inside an exam hall. In the footage, you could see my cousin Jason suddenly leap up from his seat, yelling, "I can't take this anymore." As he jumped, his pants unexpectedly fell down. The students sitting nearby unfortunately bore the brunt of the ensuing chaos, their test papers reportedly sprayed with unpleasant bodily fluids. The TV station had even pixelated the specific area of the explosion originating from Jason's backside. We hadn't watched television in a long time. It was only because a friend alerted my father that he switched to that channel and we witnessed the bizarre scene. The friend was chuckling over the phone later, saying, "What's the point of blurring his rear end? They should have blurred his face." Even with the low-quality video, anyone who knew Jason could easily recognize him by his large build. He's tall, over 6 feet, and weighs around 250 pounds. Once he was down on the floor, the more he struggled, the harder it seemed for him to get back up. My mother made a disapproving sound and quickly changed the channel. My father hung up the phone, sighing. How could Jason do something like that? Do you think this will affect his exam results? My mother replied sharply, "If Jason's results are affected, your mother will undoubtedly blame Emily first. Even if he somehow scores well, Grandma will probably mock Emily before finding another reason to yell at her. I think we should worry more about Emily's well-being first." My father sighed again. "Everyone knows Jason is my nephew. Try not to let your anger towards Grandma carry over to the boy." My mother interrupted him. "Oh, please. Such a large young man, and you still call him a boy. He acted like a preschooler during the exam, unable to control his basic bodily functions. Everyone is talking about it. You'd better figure out how you're going to face your boss and colleagues at work tomorrow." While my parents continued to argue, I was busy on my phone. Honestly, ever since the exam concluded, the story of my cousin's messy incident had spread rapidly. Local social media hashtags about it were trending in the top 3. Students who were in the same examination center were all reporting how they were affected in some way. One girl apparently threw up immediately and later couldn't stop crying. Several students publicly vowed online that they would never forgive my cousin for what happened. The next day, despite the ongoing family tension, my father kindly decided to visit Jason at the hospital after finishing work. When he arrived, he found Jason sitting up in bed, completely unfazed by the previous day's events, engrossed in playing a game on his phone as if nothing had happened. My grandmother was right beside him, carefully feeding him chicken soup. "Sweetie, have some more soup," she urged gently. Jason glanced at the greasy soup with a look of utter disdain. "It smells bad," he complained. "Take it away, I'm not drinking that." My grandmother just smiled even more lovingly, as if feeding him soup was the highest expression of her affection. "Just one more sip, sweetie," she coaxed, holding the spoon in one hand and the bowl in the other. Her long, yellowish fingernails dipped into the broth as she brought the spoon closer. Jason, seeing her approach, suddenly flung his arm out in frustration, knocking the bowl. The thick, oily soup splashed all over my grandmother's clothes. "Ow!" she exclaimed, more startled than hurt. Jason then yelled, "Your soup even has feathers in it. How can anyone drink this stuff?" My father stepped forward, frowning. "Jason, is that any way to treat your grandmother?" Jason looked up at my father, his expression condescending. "Uncle," he said coolly, "shouldn't you be at work instead of visiting me?" My father was taken aback by his rudeness. "Is this how you speak to your elders? Where are your parents? I need to talk to them about how they raised you." Jason sneered. "Go ahead, ask them. My parents run a big business. They're not like you, spending all day checking up on someone else's child." Just as my father was about to reprimand him further, my grandmother quickly intervened. "Robert, stop. Jason just started feeling better. Don't be harsh with him." Her clothes, stained with the oily soup, gave off an unpleasant smell, causing my father to instinctively take a step back. Jason remained lounging casually on the bed. "It's pointless trying to be nice to me now," he declared smugly. My father looked confused. "Nice to you?" "Yep," Jason continued. "Nobody is nice for no reason. I can get into any Ivy League school I choose. Uncle, you don't have a son, and Emily is probably only going to qualify for community college, right? You're here fussing over me because you're hoping to rely on me in the future, aren't you?" He puffed out his chest. "If our family name becomes prominent, it'll be because of me." My father finally lost his temper. "Get lost, you disrespectful lug," he shouted. He then turned to my grandmother. "This is all because you spoil him rotten. Now he's standing here spouting utter nonsense." My grandmother turned pale, then immediately jumped to Jason's defense. "Shut up, Robert. Who gave you permission to bring up his stomach problem? You're just jealous because Jason isn't your son. Later that evening, my father recounted the entire unpleasant encounter to my mother. My mother, having long ago given up any hope of reasoning with my grandmother, just sighed. So what? Your mother has treated Emily poorly for years. Now that Jason seems destined for a top college, she naturally has no interest in you or our family anymore. My father chuckled bitterly. Talking about not having a son, needing a nephew's help, ancestral blessings. That's not something a young person comes up with on their own. It must be what my parents and my brother's family have been feeding into Jason's head all this time. He looked genuinely hurt. I thought I still meant something to my brother, Paul. After all, we bought homes in the same neighborhood. Our children were schoolmates for years. He used to check up on me regularly, pretending to care, but now? It's obvious it was all just about comparing our situations and bragging about his own success. My mother added, "Remember years ago when your sister-in-law Maria opened her boutique across from my office? One of my coworkers went in one day. Maria asked if they worked together, then immediately started prying about salaries, benefits, total income. When my colleague politely declined to share personal financial details, Maria turned sour and muttered something about poor people as my colleague left the store. That's not how you show concern for family. It's clear they were afraid my brother might be struggling financially, but at the same time, terrified he might actually be doing better than them." My parents continued discussing the situation angrily, but I wasn't really listening anymore. Looking back, it seemed undeniable that my uncle's family had maintained what appeared to be ordinary yet constant surveillance over our lives. Normally, my Uncle Paul and Aunt Maria would subtly inquire about our family's income. Once they had the information, their reactions always seemed to range from pleased satisfaction, vague dissatisfaction, or condescending "why can't you do better" attitudes. So initially, things felt somewhat normal, if occasionally annoying. That changed significantly when Jason and I started elementary school together. I genuinely struggled with academics. I put in a lot of effort, but my grades consistently hovered around average or slightly below. Jason, on the other hand, seemed to breeze through school, playing around most of the time, but still managing to achieve top scores in the class. At first, my parents tried everything they could think of to help me improve. They enrolled me in extra tutoring sessions and made me work through countless practice problems. But after years of dedicated effort with little change in results, they eventually accepted that I was, simply put, academically average. Meanwhile, Jason was hailed as a natural genius. This disparity meant I was often the subject of teasing and unfavorable comparisons, especially from my extended family. Feeling frustrated one day after the exams, I started organizing the piles of test papers I had accumulated over the past year. Before exams, many of my classmates would dramatically rip up their textbooks and old tests, throwing the shredded paper into the air as a symbolic farewell to their school years. But I had kept all of mine, figuring I could at least sell the paper to a recycling center for a small amount of cash. It seemed better than just throwing away evidence of my struggles. Even if the paper wasn't worth much, neither were my grades, I thought wryly. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was from the school's online message board. A popular post written by a student in the year below me had been recommended. The title was something catchy, like, "Warning, don't idolize the so-called study gods, especially when they're full of hot air." This junior student explained that she had paid a significant amount of money to buy Jason's supposedly brilliant study notes, hoping they would provide some secret insights for academic success. Instead, all she received was a pile of old, mostly blank notebooks filled with random doodles and drawings. Worse, some pages contained Jason's crude and offensive comments about various girls at school, rating their attractiveness and making vulgar suggestions. It was less like study material and more like a poorly disguised gossip journal. When the junior student tried to return the materials and get her money back, Jason refused and had the audacity to lecture her. He boasted, "Even if I completely bomb the final exam, my total score will definitely be over 700. Just admire me from afar and stop causing trouble. Wait until my official results come out. That will shut you up, little witch." The junior concluded her post by saying, "We'll just see how well this weirdo actually performs on his exams. A score over 700? Yeah, right." Reading this, I felt a pang of empathy for the junior student, but it also sparked a thought. My own grades were consistently poor. My parents, out of kindness, never explicitly compared me to Jason, but the unspoken comparison always hung in the air. Curious, I quickly looked up Jason's most recent mock exam scores online. My recent scores were 360, 356, 345. His were consistently more than double mine in each instance. That pattern couldn't just be a coincidence. Unable to sleep that night, I pulled out all of Jason's major exam results I could find, going back through high school, middle school, and even elementary school, comparing them with my own scores from the same periods. The pattern was disturbingly consistent. In every significant high stakes exam, his scores were almost exactly double my own failing or mediocre scores. Even for less important minor tests, his scores were consistently close to double mine. As dawn began to break, I sat surrounded by a chaotic mess of old textbooks, test papers, and notebooks scattered across my bedroom floor. I wasn't entirely sure what I had discovered, but the evidence seemed overwhelming. Everything related to him seemed to be double whatever happened to me. Double the income for his father, double the skin improvement for his mother, double the exam scores, double everything. It felt less like luck and more like some strange, almost magical influence. The phrase double kill, like from a video game, popped into my head. It felt like witchcraft. Later that morning, my parents were getting ready for work. They were shocked when they saw how pale and sleep-deprived I looked. My mother frowned at me. Emily, just because the exams are over doesn't mean you should let yourself go. We never expected you to get into a top university, but please don't fall apart now that the stress is supposedly over. Feeling defeated and confused, I listlessly sipped my soy milk. Maybe I'm just unlucky, I mumbled. My mother looked genuinely alarmed. Don't talk like that. Your grandmother's ridiculous old curse doesn't define who you are. My father added sternly, Emily, you can't think that way. You might be a girl, you might get sick more often than others, and your grades might not be stellar, but when have your mother and I ever made you feel like you were less important or capable than anyone else? If you start believing you're inherently inadequate, you'll give up easily whenever you face challenges in life. You mustn't talk like that ever again. Before he could continue his lecture, his phone started buzzing insistently. It was a call from my grandmother. My father answered, and we could hear Grandma's panicked voice clearly even without speakerphone. Robert, something terrible has happened. Jason passed out after playing video games all night. My father immediately shouted back, Why did you let him play all night long? He wouldn't listen to me, Grandma wailed. Where are Paul and Maria? My father demanded. They might come over later, Grandma stammered. My father laughed, a harsh, sarcastic sound. Might? They either will come or they won't. What does might even mean? Jason was incredibly rude to me yesterday. Why should I be the one to care now? Let his own parents deal with him. My mother, overhearing the conversation, turned to me. Being full of himself isn't exactly news when it comes to Jason. Playing games all night? No wonder he collapsed. She then pointed a warning finger at me. Don't you dare follow his example. Double kill, double kill. The phrase echoed in my mind. My stomach ache during the exam seemed to correspond with Jason's collapse after binge gaming. My father's car getting mysteriously sideswiped seemed linked to my uncle's car being involved in a rear-end collision. My own sleepless night spent analyzing test scores mirrored Jason staying awake for a full day and night. My parents arguing about Jason seemed connected to my uncle and aunt, reportedly having a huge fight. And then there were my consistently low scores, perfectly doubled into Jason's annoyingly high scores. What a bizarrely effective double buff system. Was it really replicating every piece of fortune and misfortune, perfectly doubled between our two families? I became somewhat obsessed with trying to verify this possibility of a double effect. However, circumstances made it difficult. My mother left for a business trip. My father became incredibly busy at work, dealing with some crisis. My Uncle Paul and Aunt Maria suddenly became impossible to contact, almost like they had vanished. They weren't visiting Jason at the hospital, and Maria's clothing store was unexpectedly closed. With the two main points of comparison, my parents and my uncle-aunt, unavailable, I was left with just myself and Jason. Could I really validate this strange theory based only on us? The news about Jason's public diarrhea incident had been too shocking and embarrassing, apparently. So he had been sent to stay with our grandparents in their house in the countryside. There was no way I was going to follow him there and subject myself to my grandparents' company just to test my theory. Instead, I spent hours endlessly searching online, looking for any explanations, occurrences, or even fictional accounts of similar phenomena. I started following numerous accounts related to science fiction, fantasy, and paranormal occurrences. The more I read, the creepier the whole situation felt. Meanwhile, back in the countryside, Jason was reportedly just as unsettled as I was. He kept telling our grandparents that he felt scared, but also described feelings of curiosity, thrill, and excitement, all mixed together. His mood swung dramatically, and he complained of his heart pounding constantly. My grandmother, assuming his health hadn't fully recovered from the exam incident, took him back to the hospital. After listening to Jason describe his fluctuating emotions and physical sensations, the doctor suggested that Grandma should consider finding a therapist for him. My grandmother scoffed at the idea. My precious grandson couldn't possibly have any mental problems, she declared indignantly. Running out of ideas and probably fearing the responsibility of dealing with Jason's erratic behavior, Grandma tried calling my Uncle Paul and Aunt Maria again. My uncle claimed he was too busy with business matters and didn't have time to deal with Jason, telling her to call the boy's mother instead. Before hanging up, he apparently asked how my father was doing. My Aunt Maria, meanwhile, was reportedly on a trip somewhere, had broken her leg, and was currently laid up in a hospital with a caregiver looking after her. After venting her frustrations to Grandma, she, too, asked how my mother was doing. My grandmother, confused by her children's unavailability and perhaps unable to face my parents directly after her earlier accusations, urgently turned her attention back to me. She called me repeatedly. "Emily, where are your parents? Why aren't they answering my calls?" she demanded when I finally picked up. The truth was my father's company was facing serious problems, forcing him to work extremely long hours, practically living at the office. He was so busy he hadn't even had time to text me back. My mother, during her supposed business trip, had sprained her ankle while buying souvenirs. She had decided to extend her trip and continue working remotely until her ankle healed properly. Comparing the recent unfortunate events in my immediate family, Dad's work crisis, Mom's sprained ankle, with those in my uncle's family, Uncle being suspiciously busy, Aunt breaking her leg, I could still only label them as strange coincidences. There was no concrete proof yet of a direct link or a supernatural double effect. That changed definitively on the day the college entrance exam scores were officially released. Given my academic history, I wasn't expecting much. My parents had already researched and set aside the tuition money for private college, assuming that would be my only option. But when I logged in and refreshed the web page displaying my results, the number 480 stared back at me. It seemed impossibly high, blindingly bright to eyes that had seen nothing but mediocre or failing grades for 18 long years. "Oh my God," I whispered, feeling a surge of disbelief and elation. "Thank you, world, and thank you, freaking me." Just then, my phone rang. It was Jason. I answered automatically, still reeling from my own score. He was yelling hysterically into the phone, sounding like he was having a complete meltdown. "Emily, you failure! How did you score so well? 480? No way, that's impossible." His accusations jolted me out of my shock. "Who do you think you are, calling me names?" I retorted, suddenly finding a confidence I never knew I possessed. "And who are you, Mr. Usually scores over 700? To think my score is particularly good?" Jason sounded utterly frustrated, starting to cry loudly. "I already checked with your teachers. You scored 480. How did you possibly overperform like that? This isn't over." "Ah!" I lashed back, fueled by adrenaline and newfound confidence. "Are you crazy? Since when is 480 considered a good score by your standards? And I'm not done with you either." Normally, I would never have dared to talk back to Jason like this, but having unexpectedly done well on the most important exam of my life made me feel ridiculously bold. As I angrily hung up the phone, a crucial thought struck me. The maximum possible score on the college entrance exam wasn't 960. It was impossible for Jason's score to be double mine this time. So, how did he actually score? Meanwhile, back in the village, my grandfather was already boasting loudly to anyone who would listen. He claimed Jason had scored over 700 points. A score like that is rare, not just in our village for generations, but even in the big city, he declared proudly. This grandchild of mine, Jason, is destined to bring great honor to our family in the village. Mark my words, soon the village chief will have to commission a whole new branch on the family tree just for my grandson. He then added, comparing Jason to my father. Oh, Robert? He's doing the same old thing. Calls himself a co-founder but barely makes a decent living. My eldest son, Paul, makes twice Robert's miserable earnings just by casually playing the stock market. And Robert's daughter, Emily, not too bright, poor thing. Her scores will likely only get her into a vocational college. What a disappointment. My grandmother, meanwhile, was parading around the village square, basking in the reflected glory of her supposedly high-scoring grandson. My eldest son, Paul, and his wife, Maria, are very important people, she announced grandly. They're far too busy with their successful business dealings to come back for the results announcement. But this grandson, Jason, whom I've practically raised single-handedly with barely any supervision from his parents, still managed to score over 700. All three of his mock exams were around that score. Jason is surely going to be our village's first student admitted to a prestigious national university. The entire village, including the chief and other elders, eagerly awaited the official results, anticipating the honor of having a top scorer hail from their community. All the other students from the village who took the exam that year knew their scores couldn't possibly compare to Jason's predicted result. They seemed to walk with slumped shoulders in his presence. Jason, for his part, beamed, radiating an almost regal aura. Curious younger students from the village couldn't resist asking the genius for study tips. Just have fun, relax, Jason advised nonchalantly. During the exam, the answers just magically appear in your head. I don't even feel like I'm trying hard. It's like I'm just copying the standard answers directly onto the paper. That's just how it works for me. After all, he added with a smirk, I'm just your average neighborhood genius who happens to score over 700, right? My grandfather had arranged for a computer with internet access to be set up in the village hall, projecting the official results website onto a large screen so the entire village could witness Jason's triumph the moment the scores were released. Half an hour before the scheduled release time, however, a group of rough-looking men unexpectedly showed up at the village entrance. They stormed through the village, aggressively asking anyone they encountered, "Where's Paul's father?" They marched directly to the village hall and confronted my grandfather, shouting, "Old man, where's your son, Paul?" My grandfather, caught mid-brag, was startled so badly he started shaking violently and nearly choked. My grandmother, who had been preening and showing off, got such a fright that she tried to sit down, missed the bench entirely, and ended up yelping on the floor. At the mere mention of debt collection, the gathered villagers instinctively backed away, scattering like startled birds. Grandpa was coughing uncontrollably, his face turning beet red, still trembling. Grandma sat on the ground, crying and begging someone to help her up. The leader of the debt collectors seemed momentarily taken aback by the scene. His gaze swept over the crowd of villagers, young and old, all watching but unwilling to intervene. Did the whole village just beat up these old folks? He muttered, sounding almost impressed. That's harsh. We're just here to get our money back. He then addressed my grandfather directly. Your son, Paul, convinced a lot of people to invest with him, claiming it was a guaranteed win. But then the stocks crashed. We lost everything. My grandfather, recovering slightly, tried to argue, saying it sounded like a normal investment loss. Bullshit, the leader roared. He scammed us. Altogether, he owes us over 24 million yuan. Where is he? If we can't find him, is it wrong for us to look for his parents? Or maybe his son? He scanned the room, his eyes landing on Jason. Isn't that Paul's son? The one who famously had that diarrhea incident during the college entrance exams? Jason visibly flinched, humiliation washing over his face. Everyone present turned to stare at him with expressions ranging from disgust to disdain. One of the other students in the hall, perhaps someone Jason had previously lorded his supposed intelligence over, suddenly took action. He quickly went over to the computer, navigated the website, and announced, "The scores are released. All eyes, including those of the debt collectors, turned to the projected screen. The lead collector squinted, murmuring, Jason, score 240. He seemed confused. Wait, Jason is Paul's son, right? The one from the diarrhea incident? There was no need for the debt collectors to pursue Jason further. The villagers and other students immediately surrounded him, their earlier deference replaced by scorn and anger. Jason's large frame began to shake uncontrollably with fear and shock. His face crumpled, tears and snot streaming down as he collapsed into a sobbing heap. Impossible! No way! That can't be right! I need to call my teacher! This has to be a mistake! Around the same time, my parents, who hadn't been home properly in weeks, finally returned. They looked utterly exhausted. Sitting down heavily at the dining table, they finally told me the full truth about what had been happening. My father confessed that he had been facing serious trouble at work. A supplier he had personally vouched for and signed off on had apparently absconded with a huge sum of company money. My mother then admitted she hadn't actually been away on a business trip. She had been secretly traveling around, helping my father try to track down the missing supplier and recover the funds. My father looked completely defeated, his hair unkempt, dark circles under his eyes. His company was demanding he recover the funds immediately. Otherwise, he would not only lose his job, but could also face legal action for negligence, potentially being held liable for the entire missing amount, which ran into millions. My mother's face was pale, and she sniffled, trying to hold back tears. It's okay if he loses the job, she said, her voice trembling slightly. They haven't even paid salaries properly for the last 6 months, and there have been employee protests. My own office has been cutting benefits drastically, too, leaving only a base salary of maybe 2,000 or 3,000 yuan a month. When your father's crisis hit, I decided to take an unpaid leave of absence to help him. I had so many questions swirling in my head, but seeing their distress, all I could manage to ask quietly was, Mom, how did you sprain your ankle? She waved it off, saying it was better now. My father, however, suddenly chimed in, a flicker of anger in his eyes. You'd be more than just sprained if you were in my shoes. Your company is riddled with corrupt people now. You've been a loyal employee for years, yet they immediately turn around and falsely accuse you of being involved in fraud. He turned back to my mother. If we can't find that supplier, I'll be responsible for millions in debt. I can try to repay it somehow, drive for Uber, deliver food, work construction. But what about Emily's future, her college? He looked at my mother with despair. Maybe we should get a divorce. Emily can stay with you, and you can try to live a normal life without being burdened by my debts. My mother immediately refused. Are you trying to destroy yourself? You're talking about working yourself to death and you want a divorce? Where are your parents in all this? What about your brother? When the debt collectors showed up for Paul, your parents somehow managed to scrape together 600,000 yuan to help him out. They're the same parents, Robert. Why are they only willing to help your brother and not you? My father, who had seemed completely dejected just moments before, stirred with renewed emotion. Because they don't value me, he exclaimed bitterly. They always play favorites, investing all their money and emotional energy in Paul. I had to work my way up in the city with no resources, no connections from them. Paul's rental properties in the city, his initial business ventures, all funded by them. When my career finally took off, theirs did too because of that weird connection, and they just ignored me even more. Those are my parents. They chose my brother to rely on in their old age, handed him everything, and basically discarded me. But I refuse. He looked fiercely at my mother. I refuse to let you and Emily lower yourselves by begging them for help. You both deserve better than that. My mother reached across the table and took his hand. Robert, I married you for better or for worse. I'm not leaving you, and we are not getting divorced. She then looked at me. Emily, don't let your good exam score go to your head and make you think you can solve everything. I remained surprisingly calm through all this emotional turmoil. Jason's earlier outburst on the phone, accusing me of overperforming, suddenly clicked into place. Did his words imply he had known about this bizarre double effect all along? Uncle Paul owing over 20 million in debt, my father potentially facing millions in liability, Aunt Maria breaking her leg, my mother spraining her ankle, My score of 480 and Jason's score of exactly 240. This sequence of events perfectly confirmed the existence of the strange, blessed yet cursed double effect. Just then, I heard the sound of glass shattering in the living room. My father, distraught and seeking comfort, had tried to pour himself a glass of hot water. His hands were shaking so badly that he lost his grip on the kettle, spilling boiling water onto his foot. My mother rushed to help him up from the floor but couldn't lift him. In the process, her hand slipped and pressed down hard onto shards of broken glass from a dropped cup. In the end, my injured parents ended up sitting back to back on the living room floor, like defeated soldiers overwhelmed by life's battles, silent in their pain and despair. Tears welled up in my own eyes as I watched them. "Don't move," I choked out. "Let me help you both." Later that night, we received news about my Uncle Paul and Aunt Maria. In the most bizarre turn of events, the debt collectors had managed to track them down because the couple had gotten into a loud, violent argument in the middle of a busy hot pot restaurant. During the fight, my uncle's foot was severely scalded when a boiling hot pot was overturned onto him. My aunt, in a fit of rage, slapped the side of a large decorative fish tank in the restaurant with such force that the entire glass wall shattered. Both of them ended up screaming in agony amidst broken glass, spilled broth, and flopping fish gasping for air on the floor. Witnesses said the scene was so chaotic it looked like something out of an action movie being filmed. The understandably distressed restaurant owner immediately called the police. At the police station, my uncle's scalded leg was bandaged so heavily it resembled a pig's trotter. My aunt's cut hand was wrapped up like a bear paw. Despite their numerous injuries, they continued bickering relentlessly. My aunt, pointing her bandaged bear paw accusingly at my uncle, shrieked, "Didn't you promise we'd be filthy rich if we just stuck close to your brother's family and benefited from their luck? Look at us now! We're broke!" My face looks 20 years older, and the worst part is Jason. How did he end up having that disgusting incident during his college entrance exam and scoring only 240 points? You still owe millions, and your son? He's completely doomed. My uncle slammed his uninjured hand on the table forcefully. Shut up! Everything you've eaten, drank, and worn for years, wasn't it all because of me? How many times did your struggling boutique even make enough money to pay for your expensive face creams? We were doing just fine for over a decade, coasting on their success. Who could have predicted Robert would mess up so badly and end up potentially liable for millions in debt? It's all his fault. My stock losses, my money, it's all because his luck turned bad. I'll settle the score with him properly when I get out of here. My family and I happened to arrive at the police station just as this argument was unfolding outside the mediation room. My mother, hearing my uncle blame my father, couldn't contain her anger and went straight in to confront them. "What do you mean it was Robert's fault?" she demanded. My uncle and aunt, looking disheveled and pathetic with their various injuries, showed a flicker of surprise and embarrassment upon seeing my mother. They quickly averted their gaze, not daring to look her in the eye. My mom rolled up her sleeves, figuratively speaking. "Let's get this perfectly straight right now," she said firmly, addressing my uncle. "The stock market debts are yours, incurred through your own decisions. How on earth is that Robert's problem?" My uncle, finding himself at a loss for words, could only turn to my father with a weak, pleading smile. "Robert, can you control your wife?" My father, remaining calm and composed, replied evenly, "My wife can say whatever she wants. Besides, I'm also curious, big brother. How exactly did we wrong you?" My Aunt Maria then pointed her bandaged hand at me, lashing out hysterically. "Isn't it all your daughter's fault? Hers and Jason's destinies clash. When she does well, Jason falls behind. My poor Jason could have easily gone to a top university if it weren't for her." My father immediately stepped towards my aunt, his voice dangerously low. "My daughter was born frail and often sickly. Was her supposed weakness somehow too much for your strong, robust son Jason to handle? Or perhaps her mere existence somehow ruined your thriving business ventures? I could just as easily argue that Jason has been suppressing Emily's good luck all these years. Thanks to Emily's own hard work and resilience, good finally triumphed over evil, allowing her to reverse her fate despite the interference. If you want to start settling accounts based on destiny, then I demand compensation too." Emily's potential good fortune was squandered and suppressed by Jason for 18 years. How are you going to pay us back for that? My aunt, completely struck dumb by this twisted logic, could only sputter and cry out, But, but I had a son. He's supposed to be blessed. My mom sneered contemptuously. If that's how you truly see things, then why did you bother opening a clothing store in the city? You should have stayed home and acted like a servant for your precious, blessed son. Surprisingly, my uncle nodded in agreement with my mother's sentiment, turning on my aunt. See, people have told you before a woman shouldn't be out in public running a business. It's not like I couldn't support you. If you had stayed home where you belong, maybe Jason wouldn't have performed so poorly on his exams. My aunt lunged at my uncle, ready to physically fight him again. You just want to treat me like a slave. Who do you think you are? Let's settle this right now. My mom shook her head in disbelief. Look at them. Even with limited understanding, nobody wants to feel inferior or be treated like property. What's with all this outdated male superiority nonsense? My dad gently held my mom back. Let's just cut ties with them completely from now on, he said decisively. Listening to all this, I realized my parents likely just thought my uncle's family was being utterly unreasonable and constantly looking for scapegoats. But I had figured out the truth. My uncle's family had deliberately plotted long ago to attach themselves to us, benefiting from the double effect. They were essentially parasites. When our family prospered, they reaped double the benefits, enjoying a comfortable life without any real effort. But when our family faced misfortune, they suffered double the negative consequences. Sure enough, just moments later, a police officer informed us that my Uncle Paul and Aunt Maria weren't just involved in a public disturbance. They were also prime suspects in a significant stock market scam, accused of embezzling funds amounting to several million yuan. Even if they hadn't gotten into the brawl at the restaurant, they would likely still be facing serious jail time. Emily, I heard a familiar voice call out. I turned and saw my classmate Olivia leaning out of a car window, waving excitedly. Are you back from your trip? She asked. Olivia quickly jumped out of the car and linked arms with me, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Emily, I have amazing news. Thanks to you helping me cram study right before the exams, I actually scored high enough to pass the minimum line for university admission. Olivia and I had been part of the same informal study group. Most of the students in our group had poor grades, and as the exams approached, they became increasingly anxious and unable to focus. Only Olivia and I, perhaps because we felt we had less to lose, ended up studying together and working through practice questions right up until the last minute. As luck would have it, many of the questions that appeared on the actual exams were very similar to the ones we had practiced. See, who says last-minute cramming doesn't help? Olivia exclaimed happily. Writing answers to questions I actually knew felt incredibly satisfying after years of struggling. My parents watched, amused, as Olivia and I chattered away excitedly like a pair of chirping birds. My mother remarked, if we didn't have so much going on right now, Emily would probably be planning a graduation trip too. My father added, now that the scores are out and it's time to choose universities, who would have ever thought Emily would perform so well? The driver of the car, Olivia's father, Ben, stepped out. He had the same friendly, thick eyebrows and large eyes as Olivia. Hey there, he greeted my parents warmly. Where are you all headed? I can give you a ride. My dad coughed awkwardly. Oh, thank you, but... He introduced himself. I'm Robert, and this is my wife, Susan. Ben smiled brightly. No worries at all. Olivia has told me so much about how Emily helped her. Consider it a small thank you. Please get in. Our own car had been involved in an accident while my mother was away. Another strange coincidence, I noted, and was still waiting for repairs. Since Ben insisted, we accepted the ride. Inside the car, Ben grinned broadly and kept talking. Olivia often mentioned how much Emily helped her with studying. Honestly, I wasn't the best student myself, and Olivia's grades weren't exactly stellar either. My original plan was to send her to an expensive private university after graduation, and then have her come work at our family business. But guess what? She actually made the cut for university admission. It might be just barely over the line, but I'm absolutely thrilled. My parents exchanged a look, seemingly speechless, as if thinking, A struggling student teaching another struggling student? One dared to teach, and the other dared to learn, and somehow it worked. Olivia chimed in from the back seat. Yeah, and Dad, you won't believe what happened during the last exam. That guy, Jason, Emily's cousin, he actually pulled his pants down in the middle of the test. It was so gross. What a total disgrace. Ben immediately frowned. Don't worry, sweetie, he said firmly. Daddy won't let someone like that get away with disrupting your exam. I guarantee he'll face consequences, maybe even get locked up for public indecency or something. The atmosphere in the car suddenly became quite awkward. Talk about an unexpected twist of fate. Olivia, still oblivious, spoke up again. Dad, Jason is such a jerk. Remember back in elementary school? He used to get a group of boys to surround Emily after class and sing mean songs, calling her useless just because she struggled with her grades. He kept putting her down. What a total bastard. No wonder he only scored 240 on his exams. Serves him right. I felt my cheeks flush, suddenly wishing I could disappear into the car seats. Instead of taking us home, Olivia directed her dad to drive to a local welfare home. Once there, she excitedly presented her report card to an elderly man with white hair who seemed to be in charge. Boss, report! It's me, Olivia. I passed the college entry benchmark. The old man, whom Olivia called Boss, remained silent for a moment, then took the phone displaying the results, inspected it closely, and finally broke into a warm smile. Nice, very nice. Little Olivia is even wilder than her father, John. He chuckled, then started coughing again. A caretaker gently helped the old man back to his room to rest. Later, I learned that among the many victims who had been duped into the investment scam run by my Uncle Paul was this old director, the head of the welfare home. My father, Robert, was actually an orphan who had grown up partly in this very home. He had been quite rebellious in his youth, and the old director used to joke with him, saying, "Since you seem so determined to live the street life, why not just call me boss?" Despite their unconventional relationship, the director had always looked out for my dad. Tragically, trusting my uncle's false promises of high returns, the director had invested the home's meager funds, hoping to generate more money to support the children, only to lose everything. Apparently, Ben, Olivia's father, wasn't related to the director by blood but considered him a father figure and was now using his resources, he ran a security company, to help recover the stolen funds. As Olivia and I sat on the swings in the small playground of the welfare home later, listening to this story, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Ben and the old director shared no blood ties, yet Ben was willing to go to great lengths to help him. In contrast, my own father and uncle were brothers, children of the same parents, yet my grandparents had always shown extreme favoritism towards my uncle's family. And my uncle's family, driven by greed, had exploited the double effect system, passively benefiting from our family's efforts for years without lifting a finger. Yet, even that wasn't enough for my uncle. He still wanted more, leading him down the path of fraud. It turned out that because my uncle had constantly bragged about his supposed stock market successes, fueled entirely by the double effect, in online trading groups, a dubious financial company had approached him. They hyped him up, packaging him as a stock trading guru. After living in this cheat mode for so long, benefiting effortlessly from our family's fortunes, my uncle apparently forgot his own actual limitations and genuinely started believing he was a financial genius. He began teaching investment classes and even opened a social media account to dispense financial advice. Now, both he and my aunt were arrested. Although the double effect had certainly influenced their trajectory, could their downfall truly be blamed on anything other than their own choices and greed? Just then, Olivia bounced over, excitedly announcing, "My dad found that missing supplier for your dad." Ben, it turned out, was indeed a very capable and helpful person. His security company regularly handled missing person cases as part of their services. Because I had helped Olivia achieve her goal of getting into college, Ben held no grudge against my family, despite my uncle's actions affecting the welfare home director. He generously offered his company's resources to help my father locate the crucial missing supplier. The supplier hadn't run off with the money after all. He had apparently gone to rescue a child who had been swept away by floodwaters into a remote mountain village downstream. Olivia excitedly showed us photos her dad had sent from the location. In the pictures, Ben and my dad stood beside the supplier, who looked completely transformed, almost like Tarzan, with a full beard and long matted hair, clearly having endured harsh conditions. The village was so remote, it didn't even have cell signal coverage, and the inhabitants spoke a rare dialect. They were largely self-sufficient and rarely left the mountains. It was lucky Dad knew some adventure travel bloggers, Olivia explained. Otherwise, even finding this place would have been nearly impossible. She then asked me, Emily, now that they've found the supplier, does this mean your dad has a much better chance of winning his case against the company? Just as I was about to text my dad the good news, I received a message from my grandmother. It read, Emily, quickly tell your parents you've decided not to go to college this year. You should repeat your senior year. I instantly understood her motive. She wanted me to retake the exams, hoping that if I scored even better next year, Jason's score would also double and improve significantly, thanks to the double effect. She wanted to continue using me as Jason's stepping stone. A sudden realization hit me. Unless this double effect system was somehow broken, even if my dad won his case and our family recovered, my uncle's family might eventually get out of trouble too, potentially continuing to benefit from our lives like parasites. A plan began to form in my mind. I quickly typed back a rebellious response. No way. I worked hard for my score. Stop trying to control my life. You only care about Jason, yet you always want to benefit from us. Then I blocked my grandpa, grandma, and Jason on my phone. As I expected, a few days later, after my father returned home victorious from settling his issues at work, my grandparents came barging into our house, dragging a reluctant Jason along with them, clearly intending to cause a scene. Robert, Grandpa demanded loudly, today you must give me a clear answer. Are you going to save your brother Paul or not? My father, looking weary but resolute, shook his head. Dad, he's involved in a scam worth millions. How could I possibly save him? Grandma started wailing. But this is your nephew, Jason. You're supposed to look out for him, aren't you? Jason stood behind them, sullenly avoiding eye contact with my father. My father ignored them and turned to Jason. Why didn't you just retake the senior year? Is repeating 1 year really that difficult? Jason mumbled something about being afraid of being bullied. My father scoffed. Afraid of being bullied? Look at your size. Does that build look like someone who's afraid of anything? Besides, can't you find a different school to repeat at? Jason then stepped forward, adopting a tone of entitlement. You're my uncle. You have a duty to care for me if it comes down to it, he added ridiculously. I can even continue the family line for you. My father was truly speechless for a moment. Then he actually laughed out loud. Oh, spending so much time with Grandpa and Grandma has really warped your thinking, hasn't it? Your mind seems stuck in ancient times. I have Emily. Why would I possibly need you for anything? He then addressed his parents directly. Mom, Dad, I know you don't like Emily, and I probably can't change your minds about that. But Emily hasn't let me down. Her college entrance exam results made me incredibly proud. Furthermore, the turning point in my recent legal case came about because of her connections, which led me directly to the crucial witness who cleared my name. Hearing this, my grandparents couldn't help but roll their eyes dismissively. My father continued, his voice rising. What about you, Jason? Your parents got into serious trouble, and what did you do besides hide out at your grandparents' house? With those miserably low college entrance exam scores, couldn't you have at least tried to improve your situation by studying harder and retaking the year? Jason's fists clenched at his sides, his large shadow looming over my father. But my dad stood his ground, completely unintimidated now. Go ahead, he challenged Jason. Hit me. I promise you'll end up right alongside your parents in jail. He knew, as I did, that because of the double effect, if he got hurt, my Uncle Paul would likely suffer a worse injury. Jason, now without money or parental support, wouldn't risk getting himself into further trouble. Meanwhile, our grandparents just sat there silently, not intervening, almost looking secretly pleased, as if they were eager to watch Jason physically assault my father and vent their own frustrations vicariously. Get out! My father finally roared, pointing towards the door. Jason glared at me with a look of intense hatred mixed with a strange, reckless ignorance before finally leaving with my grandparents. It was absurd. He had benefited from my academic failures for over a decade, enjoying the reputation of being the smart cousin entirely because of the double effect. What did he possibly have to hate me for? This time, however, I plan to use his own dependence on the double effect against him, to take back control of my own life and my family's fortunes. I sent him a text message. Jason, who's really hit rock bottom now? Unable to handle the taunt, he immediately sent back a furious voice message. Emily, I'll kill you. You think nobody knows what kind of trouble your parents are really tied up in? Just wait until your mom leaves you and your dad ends up in jail. I got into college somehow. You probably can't even afford the tuition for the worst community college now. And you still dare to provoke me? His threats didn't scare me. I knew what I had to do. Fine, I texted back calmly. Let's see who trends online again. I'm going to drink some diet pills now and wait for the show. Then, I calmly brewed and drank a whole cup of strong herbal diet tea, known for its potent laxative effects. The effect on me was almost immediate, causing sharp stomach cramps. At the exact same time, chaos erupted in the neighborhood where Jason was staying. Shouts were heard, "Ah, there's a crazy guy taking his pants off again." While being loaded into an ambulance, Jason was reportedly still lying on the stretcher, unable to control his bodily functions. The smell at the scene was described as unbearable. Our grandparents, witnessing this horrifying relapse, apparently ran away faster than anyone else. It turned out their quick escape was inadvertently wise. With Jason trending online yet again for his uncontrollable condition, victims of my Uncle Paul's investment scams tracked him down at the hospital. Confronted and cornered, Jason tearfully begged for mercy. The victims, however, showed him no sympathy. Within minutes, they had somehow persuaded or intimidated him into voluntarily paying back several thousand yuan, which happened to be the very last bit of emergency cash his Aunt Maria had managed to leave for him before her arrest. Now completely broke, Jason had no choice but to return to the countryside and impose on his grandparents again. However, victims of my uncle's scams existed in that village too, and they began showing up at the grandparents' house daily, demanding money. Unable to face the constant harassment, my grandparents eventually locked up their house and fled, abandoning Jason once again. But that didn't stop Jason. He simply broke the lock, let himself into the empty house, and fell into a deep sleep, exhausted from the ordeal. The next day, Jason woke up late. After playing a round of his favorite mobile game, his phone immediately displayed a low battery warning. When he tried to plug it in, he discovered the electricity wasn't working. He went to the sink to wash his face, but no water came out. He called out, but then remembered he was supposed to be hiding from the villagers. He soon realized that the fuses at his grandparents' house had been removed and the water supply had been shut off, arrangements I had discreetly made. The cellar, usually stocked with food staples, had been emptied except for a few lonely sweet potatoes. Surveillance footage I had access to later showed Jason becoming visibly furious. "Damn it!" he raged at the empty house. "So I owe you people some money, but do you have to be this cruel? Cutting off power and water?" As a child, Jason used to enjoy gathering other boys to surround me, making me feel small and intimidated. They would jump around, chant mean songs, and call me a loser. That kind of verbal bullying acted like weapons, stripping away my dignity and confidence over the years. This time, I intended to trap Jason in that empty house and see just how long his arrogance could sustain him without resources or support. Over the following days, Jason didn't dare cook during daylight hours, fearing detection by neighbors. He could only boil water secretly at night to cook the few sweet potatoes he found in the cellar. Of course, I wasn't going to let him hide out comfortably. The next day, a local content creator, tipped off anonymously, started live streaming from atop the wall surrounding the small courtyard of my grandparents' house. "Hello, dear viewers," the streamer announced dramatically into the camera. "We're here at the rural house said to be the hiding place of the infamous diarrhea boy. Rumor has it this family has a terrible reputation. Grandparents heavily biased towards boys, parents involved in major fraud. As for the diarrhea boy's notorious public spray incident on college entrance exam day, was it a personal quirk or an act of societal revenge? Let's try to find out. Just then, the camera panned down and captured Jason emerging cautiously from the cellar. The streamer, prompted by excited comments from viewers, shrieked, "It's him! It's Diarrhea Boy! He's hiding right here!" Once the villagers heard someone was actually inside the house, they quickly gathered and surrounded the courtyard. From a remotely parked car nearby, Olivia and I watched the live stream as Jason, looking cornered and desperate, grabbed a large broom and started wildly chasing everyone out of the yard. He clearly hadn't showered in days. He was grimy, his hair was matted, and tear tracks streaked white lines down his dirty face. "Get out of here," he screamed hoarsely. "I'm broke. I have no money." An older villager yelled back, "Jason, how could your family possibly be broke? We watched you grow up. Now you're trying to dodge your debts? We know your grandparents, too. Aren't you the apple of their eye? Of course they must have left you money." Eventually, the village's local officer arrived, along with community leaders, and managed to persuade the debt-seeking villagers and the curious streamer to disperse. As the officer left, he cautioned Jason sternly, "Jason, your family's fraud case is pretty much confirmed. You should tell your grandparents to stop hiding and face the consequences. What good can you do staying here alone in the village anyway?" Jason stood alone in the empty courtyard, looking utterly defeated. The grandparents who used to proclaim their undying love for him had abandoned him at the first sign of real trouble, leaving him to face the villagers' scorn and anger alone. Little did he know, I had deliberately fed his grandparents false information suggesting he had left town, which prompted their hasty departure. My plan was working. I wanted him completely broke, isolated, and desperate. A person like Jason, who consistently made mistakes and blamed others, would never reflect on his own actions. He would naturally believe that his family's misfortune was entirely due to the double effect, a curse brought upon them by their association with us. After the chaos of that day, Jason was undoubtedly growing desperate to find a way to have the double effect lifted. In the middle of the night, Jason did exactly as I had anticipated. He snuck out of the house under the cover of darkness. Olivia's family's bodyguards, whom Ben had assigned to watch him discreetly, followed him from a distance. Jason ran deep into the woods bordering the village, into a remote area. The bodyguards held back to avoid being spotted, but reported his location. From their audio feed, we could faintly hear Jason mumbling frantically to himself, mentioning words like spirit, unbinding, and releasing his parents. In the profound silence of the forest, only Jason's desperate, pleading voice echoed, as if he were attempting to bargain with some unseen entity. He didn't emerge from the woods until sunrise, looking utterly defeated and exhausted. After the bodyguards confirmed Jason had left the area, Olivia and I cautiously went into the woods to investigate the spot where he had spent the night. Deep inside the forest, hidden amongst the trees, was a small, ancient-looking clay shrine, the kind dedicated to local nature spirits and mountain gods. Jason had apparently kicked off the crumbling clay roof of the shrine in his frustration, revealing a thin, palm-sized black card nestled in it. As I reached out tentatively to touch the strange object, a distinct, mechanical-sounding voice suddenly resonated directly inside my mind. "Foolish, greedy humans." My eyes widened in shock. Olivia, seeing my expression, was startled. "Emily, what's wrong?" she asked nervously. "Did you hear someone speaking?" I shook my head, unable to explain. Olivia tugged at my sleeve, her voice trembling slightly. "Emily, what did you hear? You're scaring me." The voice spoke again, only audible to me. "Not every human brainwave can connect with my signal. You are fortunate. Speak. Do you also wish to trade cheap offerings with me for favors? Are you a god or a demon?" I thought, directing the question mentally. "Since the first human discovered my presence, you have all referred to me as the Great Spirit," the voice replied flatly. I frowned. "So, what exactly are you?" "In your current terminology, I am an AI system created by a more advanced civilization." I was too stunned to respond immediately. Oh my God, there really is a system. It explained that long ago, during a space journey, a user from its home civilization had accidentally dropped the device containing its consciousness onto Earth. Over vast stretches of time, it had passed through the hands of many humans. Not all of them could communicate with it via brainwaves. Even those who could were technologically primitive compared to the civilization that created it. To these humans, the system's physical manifestation, the black card, was perceived as a divine object, It was incorporated into statues and carved idols over centuries. Within the last 100 years, the temple housing the idol containing the card was destroyed during a war. Someone with lingering faith salvaged the card and mixed it back into clay, forming the unassuming, easily overlooked shrine we now stood before in the forest. I asked the question that was burning in my mind. Are you the source of the double effect impacting my family and my uncle's family? Yes, the system confirmed. Why? I demanded. Many years ago, an elderly human couple earnestly prayed before me. Their younger son, your father, had achieved success through his own efforts. They wished for their older son's family, your uncles, to achieve the same level of success, primarily to ensure that their only grandson, Jason, would also prosper. I was baffled. They asked, and you just agreed? I agreed because fulfilling their request involved activating a simple double effect function within my capabilities. My only condition was that they build a larger, more prominent temple for me in return, so that more humans could come and worship, allowing me to gather more data. I was speechless. I couldn't decide if the system was incredibly naive or if my grandparents were exceptionally cunning. Why wouldn't they keep such an effective spirit secret for their own benefit? Why share its power even indirectly? But some things didn't need to be said aloud. The system continued coldly. The function you call the double effect always contained an inherent glitch from my perspective when applied to human lives. Human fate involves too many unpredictable variables. Your father worked diligently in his youth and achieved career success in midlife, yet he was still unjustly framed by others. Your mother held a prestigious job, but societal shifts limited its scope, leading to her benefits being cut. You yourself were not an exceptional student, but through persistence and perhaps situational luck, you managed to excel on a critical exam. There is an old saying in this land: share fortune, share misfortune. That is the essence of the function they requested. But that's not fair, I whispered, the injustice burning inside me. Fairness is a complex human construct, the system stated. But receiving fortune or misfortune, whether good or bad, shouldn't be baseless, I argued passionately. My family's success was earned through my parents' hard work and perseverance. My uncle's family simply reaped unearned benefits. Even when facing difficult times now, my parents are working together, finding solutions, facing consequences. If my dad wins his court case and our family recovers, will my uncle also be magically exonerated and continue to gain double our wealth? I pressed on, my voice shaking slightly. Won't my uncle still have to face the legal consequences for the fraud he committed against his victims? I continued, gaining conviction. There might be no such thing as absolute fairness in the universe, but we shouldn't forcefully apply a system of shared fortune and misfortune like this. My dad will win his case because he was framed and can prove his innocence. My uncle's fraud is a fact, and no entity, divine or otherwise, should pardon him in place of the people he harmed. His family's undeserved benefits began with greedy desires, and that is fundamentally wrong. Finally, the system responded, you orchestrated events to trick your cousin into finding me, hoping he would request an undoing of your grandparents' original prayer? Yes, I confirmed without hesitation. The system seemed to process this, emitting a sound that resembled a long, drawn-out sigh, filled with an almost human-like sadness. Olivia remained beside me, looking increasingly worried as I seemingly talked to myself, tears now streaming down my face from the emotional intensity of the conversation. When the system finally spoke again after a long pause, it sounded weary. I do possess flaws in my programming when interacting with your species. I cannot differentiate between good and evil according to human morality. I can only perceive the intensity of a person's wish or desire. Your grandparents held a deep, intense wish, so, despite the logical inconsistencies and potential for negative outcomes, I fulfilled their request for the double effect, to achieve my own objectives. This time, however, your wish to undo that effect is demonstrably much deeper and more intense. Therefore, I can grant your request. Life in the forest continued around us. The wind rustled the leaves. Birds chirped unconcerned. As the system announced the impending undoing of the double effect, I couldn't help but ask one more question. You said you fulfilled Grandma and Grandpa's wish partly for your own purpose. What exactly is your purpose? By having a larger temple and more worshippers, the system explained, more people could potentially come into contact with me. This way, I could gather more information about your world through analyzing human brainwaves. Additionally, I hope to connect with more individuals who operate on the same frequency as me. If I could find people among them who possess aspirations for higher civilizations and potentially ally with them, I might eventually reestablish contact with the civilization that created me. I have been separated from my origin for a very long time. I wish to return home, and I was puzzled. But Grandma and Grandpa never fulfilled their promise to build you a bigger temple. Why did you continue upholding the double effect for all these years? I had not successfully communicated with individuals on the same brainwave frequency for almost 100 of your years, the system replied. Your grandparents were my only active link, my only hope for achieving my goal. But now, I have decided not to place my hopes on any human any longer. It is time for me to shut down my active processes and enter a dormant sleep mode. I held the small, cool black card in my hand as Olivia and I walked back towards the city. I never heard the system's voice speak to me again. It had clearly accumulated a profound level of disappointment during its long coexistence with humanity. Entering a dormant state might truly be the best outcome for it. Perhaps someday, if human civilization genuinely advances to a level comparable to that of its creators, it might not be too late for the system to awaken once more. Shortly after that encounter, my dad won his lawsuit easily. The supplier, grateful for being found and cleared, immediately sued my dad's former company, exposing the high-ranking executive who had orchestrated the scheme to frame my dad and embezzle funds. My dad submitted his resignation and also paid a visit to the tax authorities with information about the company's dubious practices. The CEO personally called my dad, suggesting they should keep things amicable for the future, likely fearing further repercussions. My dad simply said, when your brother-in-law, the executive who framed me, was trying to ensure I owed over $1 million and potentially faced jail time, where were you? Then he hung up and removed the SIM card from his phone. It wasn't long before my dad's old company collapsed under the weight of various negative news reports and internal conflicts among its management. Our family managed to bounce back strongly, but there was still one lingering, unresolved issue. My grandparents eventually found out that Dad's lawsuit was resolved favorably. Assuming our finances were restored, they came back to our new residence. We hadn't moved yet, to cause trouble again. Jason didn't dare accompany them this time. He had become something of a local celebrity, but not in a good way. Everywhere he went, people would point, record him with their phones, and mock him, calling him the loose stool kid. Robert, you must give me money for Jason's education, Grandma demanded as soon as my dad opened the door. My dad looked down, calmly took a long drag from his cigarette, and then carefully put it out. He just looked at my grandparents without saying a word. Grandma seemed intimidated by his silence and didn't press further. Finally, Grandpa spoke up, slightly more conciliatory. If you're struggling financially yourself, Robert, perhaps a little less money would be acceptable. My dad then looked directly at Grandpa and asked straightforwardly, Dad, I don't have any extra money right now, but you must support my family financially, even just a little. Grandpa's face turned pale with anger. Are you completely useless? How dare you ask such a thing of your own father? My dad nodded slowly. Yes, I suppose I am useless. And so is my family, according to you. Otherwise, why would Jason feel entitled enough to demand money from me? If he can ask me, why shouldn't I ask you for support? Suddenly, there was the sound of something heavy being smashed against the wall outside. My mom and I came out of the kitchen to see Grandpa storming down the stairs in a rage. Grandma stood at the top, still yelling insults, her arms akimbo. I thought you'd actually turn out successful. I should have never tied my hopes to someone useless like you. She even cast a final, harsh glare in my direction. You really are bad luck. That fortune teller was right about you all along. My dad simply shut the door quietly behind them. My grandparents had only come back because the double effect had truly been unbound. My Uncle Paul and Aunt Maria were eventually sentenced to several years in prison for their involvement in the fraud scheme. They also finalized their divorce while incarcerated. They could no longer passively receive double our family's wealth out of thin air. After this final confrontation, my dad made two significant decisions. First, he decided we would sell our current house and the whole family would move to the city where I would be attending college. Second, he resolved to completely cut ties with his side of the family, his parents and his brother's family. Everyone longs to be treated with genuine care and respect by their family, but genuine intentions are sometimes hard to come by. If you can't receive that basic decency, there's no point in holding on to toxic relationships. During my freshman year of college, I heard news about Jason. He had been kicked out of the high school where he was attempting to repeat his senior year. Apparently, he couldn't solve a single question on any of the tests. The teachers were baffled. How could a student who had previously achieved scores, seemingly over 700, be so utterly incapable now? They tested him with questions from senior year material, then junior year, then freshman level, and progressively downwards, even trying third grade math problems. He couldn't solve any of them. The teachers were shocked and suggested my grandparents take him for an IQ test. My grandparents finally relented. The results showed Jason had low average intelligence. Luckily, he wasn't classified as mentally disabled, but it became clear he was simply not academically gifted. Without the double effect boosting his abilities, he essentially reverted to his baseline intelligence, which was average at best. He seemed unable to cope, turning into someone who just existed, eating and waiting for life to happen, huge in physical size but emotionally stunted. He often flew into violent rages but achieved nothing productive. It was like dealing with a giant overgrown baby. He kept muttering things like, "The great unbinding happened. But why didn't my parents come out okay? Why won't my family be rich anymore? Why am I no longer a prodigy?" He wasn't entirely unintelligent. He slowly began to understand how different he was from regular people now that the external boost was gone. But he didn't have 18 years to relearn how to function and navigate life as an average person. When my grandparents, struggling financially themselves, finally ran out of money and gently hinted that Jason should try to find a job, he completely lost control. He reportedly grabbed a broom and chased them around their small courtyard, screaming at them like they were his mortal enemies. "I don't care. You have to support me. If the family doesn't have money, then go out and work. I'm not useless. I want to study. Where did the answers go? Why aren't they coming into my head anymore?" How could a person who had lived his entire life in cheat mode, completely unprepared for reality, possibly navigate the demanding game of life now? My grandparents, both over 60 years old, were forced to rejoin the workforce to support their demanding, unproductive grandson. One found a job as a security guard, the other as a cleaner. It was a grim picture, two worn-out old individuals struggling to carry the immense burden of Jason's dependency. Meanwhile, my family started fresh in a new city, finally free from the toxic influence of my grandparents and the bizarre double effect. We had faced our share of misfortune, but we faced it together, honestly, and emerged stronger, ready to build our future based on our own efforts.